Hello, so I'm talking to you in very early January and the temperatures are about 6 to 7 degrees above the seasonal normal. And although it's pouring with rain outside, I have to say it's a good time to go fishing, and a pal of mine has just texted me to say he's just caught one this morning. So, what are we talking about? We're talking at 11 o'clock and yeah, brilliant conditions, almost spring conditions. So what are we going to be talking about in this clip? We're going to be talking about Boilie Tactics, making boilies, and a whole lot of other things, little things that I do which have worked for me. You might want to try them and they might work for you. And I've made some notes here so I don't forget the theme of it. So I'm going to be talking about what constitutes a good and efficient boilie recipe. I'm going to be talking about why is this important. I'm going to talk about how you test your bait. Might sound simple that, but there's various things you can do to test a bait depending on what access you have to various things like an aquarium or a garden pond. That's quite a useful little tip. There's a few bait companies test their baits in aquariums. Very interesting results. Different results in an aquarium to that which you get in a wild situation or in a proper fishery. And where to fish in the lake. That might sound a bit weird to say, where do I go fishing in a lake? Because it depends on what swim you can get. If it's a busy fishery, you might be restricted to where you fish, but where you cast can be significant, and the depth of water that you're fishing in, particularly this time of year. So we'll cover that point as well. So I'll get straight into the first part of it, which is what constitutes a nutritional boilie. Some of you that watch my YouTube clips regularly will have heard me say this before, but I will repeat it. For long-term success, and particularly if you're on one venue and you concentrate all your effort on one venue at any given time, then if you get used to using a good quality bait, you don't need much of it. So you don't need large amounts of bait. What you do need is a bait that contains those essential nutrients that carp require. So that's carbohydrate, protein, fat, vitamins and minerals. And you need to work in conjunction, if you can, with your bait supplier. And if you're making bait yourself, by sourcing your own ingredients and making your bait up at home, then you can tell by the description of the ingredients you're buying on all the various websites that sell ingredients, or if you go to health food shop suppliers or your local health food shop or supermarket, it will have a description of the ingredients and their relevant fat, protein, nutrient content, vitamins and minerals on the packet. Sounds obvious, but you can work it out for yourself. And the most important thing is, does your bait roll? Will it hold together? Does it freeze okay? Are you happy with the flavours you're using? And if you're using the right flavours, you don't need much because it's all in the mix. So you might say, I've answered 1 and 2, why is it important, and both of those, but it's important for another reason. And for the other reason is that because most people don't go to the effort of making bait themselves or working closely in conjunction with their bait or rolling company to get the profile of the mix they require, because it is a lot of effort to make a high quality bait, and very often the cost is a little bit higher too, particularly now because a lot of the ingredients have gone up in price hugely. I mean, fish meal, low temperature fish meal, and LT94 for example, used to be about £400 or £500 a tonne. It's now about £2,400 a tonne. So that's if you're buying a tonne. So you can straight away see that these high quality ingredients have gone up to 100% increase in the last 3 years, which makes a very big difference into companies swapping and changing ingredients around, sometimes for the good, sometimes perhaps not for the good, in order to get the best results and make the most profit out of their bait. That is by no way a criticism of others, definitely not, because it's a free world. You can say what you like, providing it's fair and reasonable. And I think I am very fair and reasonable in what I've said on all these clips. So people might say, well, expensive bait, do you need it? The proof of the pudding is in your consistent catch rate. So you have to decide whether you're happy enough with the bait you are using. And then we come to testing. I've got lots to go through here, so I'm going to sort of plough on quite quickly. Testing bait. So there's various ways you can test it. One of the best ways that I've found is don't buy too much bait in one go. If you want to change bait, or if you're designing your own recipes at home, make up a small batch. If you've got an aquarium with a carp in it, give it a test. Although aquarium fish will eat virtually anything, so you have to gauge their reaction against something that you've perhaps used before, or something which is just an average test. So maybe something, a bait or a paste with no flavour in it, or a boilie that you've had in the freezer that you know has been previously successful. So an aquarium test. Number two, an easy fishery test. So if you've got a local small lake near you that you can get down to, and there's bait going in all the time, and it's a day ticket lake, and you can perhaps get a few smallish fish, it's a good place to test the bait out on there. So small fisheries. And garden ponds. Garden ponds is a great one. Some people have got a few koi carp, maybe they've got a few not non-koi carp, standard carp in there as well, and a few goldfish bits and pieces, and you can pull your bait off, put it in the edge, and very often, if the bait is not so good, you'll find it remains on the bed of the pond uneaten. So think about that one. That does often happen. Or it can remain uneaten until the atmospheric conditions are right. Maybe there's a barometric pressure change, and amazingly you can come down and look at bait or food ingredients that you've tested in that pond, and they're there for 2 days, and suddenly the pressure changes, the conditions change, and the next morning when you go down, the bait's all gone. That's happened to many of my friends who have ponds that test their bait in ponds. So another good test. And by far my favourite test is what I would call the on-site test. So where you're actually fishing. If there's a no-go area, that's a no-go for fishing. If there's an area of snags, thick weed beds, or an area where you can observe the fish, depends on water clarity, test your bait in there. And amazingly, I'll tell you a story about testing bait in a snaggy area that you weren't allowed to fish. So you're just in there, chuck a few boilies in. Many years ago, fishing a club lake in the Colne Valley, I went fishing and used the bait that had been successful somewhere else. And I used this same recipe, I used this same bait. I can't remember what it was now exactly, but I remember what the flavour was. It was the old salmon flavour from years ago that I gave to Rod Hutchinson. It's called Pucker Salmon, and you could overdose that quite a lot, and that was in the bait, but at really high levels. I think we were using something like 10 mil to 6 eggs, which is way too much. Anyway, I'd been successful on another lake catching, and I tried it on this particular lake. I couldn't get a bite. I thought there's got to be something wrong here, so I reeled in, packed up, and I went to the snag trees, at the end of the lake, and threw a few boilies in at the beginning of a session, I think it was. And then I went back there throughout the day, checking. There were fish in there, you could see the fish in the snags. And went back, boilies were still there at the end of the day. I thought, right, my bait's too strong. So I halved the flavour level, halved it. Came back, threw some boilies in, fish took them straight away. Started fishing in the main part of the lake, caught 2 that day. So there's a good test. If the base mix is good, they'll eat it without any flavour. A little bit of flavour simply acts as a catalyst on the day you're fishing. You don't need much, but you do need a bit, and a little bit of flavour speeds up the reaction of the fish to taking the bait, and acts as a catalyst and sets you apart from other people's bait, so you can customise your own mixes. So where to fish is one of the things on my list as well to talk about. I said this would be a bit of a roller coaster. So early part of the year, as I said, we're in January, and the fish tend to move, particularly if you do, not today, but you're lucky enough to get a bit of a sunny day, particularly as the month goes on and it goes into February. If you do get some sunshine, even this time of year, the fish do like to move in the sun near the reeds. they like to move in the shallows. So I think you need to be looking for water between 6 to 8 feet deep. That's what I would fish. I would tend to prefer to fish shallow water. If you use a thermometer and you have got an opportunity to cast that out or go in a boat and drop one over manually, you'll see a huge difference in the water temperature at 10 feet deep as you will at the water temperature that's 3 or 4 feet deep. In the summer, that is particularly significant when you're baiting up early in the season and when you're fishing early in the season, because the oxygen levels are better in shallow water in summer. I'll throw that one in even though it's a winter video. So where you fish, I would tend to use a visual bait if the water's clear. And it doesn't matter a jot what colour your bait is middle of the night. And obviously this time of year it's dark for 13 or 14 hours and the days are often overcast. So there's a lot of chat about colour. I don't think it's majorly important. Maybe it's important if you're using crazy zig rigs. I don't like using crazy zig rigs. I don't think they're safe for fish, but I am happy to use a rig which I call a friendly zig rig. We all know what they are, so it's a bait popped up off the bottom. And I would say that my friendly zig rig will be something where I was fishing perhaps an 18-inch fluorocarbon or mono hook link. I mean, the mono I've been using recently is GR60, which is dead reliable line, absolutely fantastic. 12-pound GR60, which is distributed by Gardner. It's in most tackle shops. I've been using it for literally years. And that brings me on actually about using mono hook links for zig rigs. There's been so much written about it, I won't go on, but I do think it is best to use one or the other, so fluoro or standard mono. If you're fishing near snags, I wouldn't go below 12 pounds, but if you're using GR60, it breaks a bit more than 12 pounds. I think it breaks, the 12-pound breaks way over 15, way over. So you wouldn't have any problems with losing a fish on that breaking strain of line. So I'm going to move on to a little tactic about where to fish. If you're fishing an estate lake, a more intimate lake, a small lake, if you've perhaps got a little bit of opportunity to not be observed what you're doing, and we'll come on to this in part 2 about baiting patterns and tactics. But let's go back to where to fish. Obviously, it is going to be down to what swims are available. But if you've got an opportunity to fish a quieter venue, which I've been lucky enough over the years to fish some very quiet venues, and right in the middle of the winter, if you can be dead quiet, there is a tactic you can use which is absolutely deadly. I'll quickly mention it now. I've bought a piece of peacock quilling and I've put a hook, which in this case I just opened a packet of Boilie Continental hooks because they're that strong, you'd never break them. Dead reliable, been out for 30 years, good reliable hook. Any of the really good modern hooks are brilliant, but you ideally want something which has not got a hugely inturned eye. These have got a slight inturned eye, but a straight shank, and in fact a slightly out-curved eye. So I've put 2 rubbers up the line, 2 float caps up the line, and you might think this is supposed to be about boilies. Well, you can put a boilie on here and I'll tell you about the rig with a float or a boilie a bit later. Put that to one side for the moment. So there's been a bit of a blitz here today in this first clip of information, and it's open to discussion really how far you want to take this testing of boilies. I've mentioned the snag test, but I'm going to go back to an earlier topic. What makes a nutritional bait so important? Now, in this clip, you're going to see a still photograph of my hand with a boilie in it and some caddis grubs around it. So in their cases, they're little stick and stone cases they make. And this picture will come up on the screen as I'm talking now. And you will see in my hand a boilie which has been eaten. You can see the outside of it is all nibbled away. and it's completely surrounded by these caddis larvae cases. And there are various different types of caddis. They're quite a big moth type fly which hatch out in the spring and through the summer. And lots of lakes will have caddis, mayfly, stonefly, shrimps, snails, and a whole host of invertebrates and other creepy crawlies living on the lake bed. This is a brilliant test to see if your bait works. Drop a few boilies in the margins in the evening, or even in the day, but particularly a good time to do it, late afternoon, early evening. Drop a few boilies right close in where you can see them, particularly next to some rushes or next to a little weed bed that's in the edge. If your bait is any good, this is boilies, in the following morning they're usually completely covered in insects, completely covered in sometimes snails, all sorts of creepy crawlies nibbling away at it. There's got to be a reason for that, and the reason is that they like the ingredients that are in that boilie. They're not fish, they're insects, but there's something in it they like. And the boilie that you can see in my hand is a taste boilie, which has all the nutrients that carp require. It's not a fish meal. You've heard me speak about taste before. It's an alternative type of bait, but it's so different that these insects love it and the carp love it too. So in my hand is what has been eating that boilie, a great test to see if the animals in that lake, fish and insects, like a boilie. If no insects are on your boilie in the morning, there's only going to be two reasons for it. Number one, there's not many insects in the lake. There's not much emergent life. There's not many creepy crawlies. And number two, they don't like it. So try that test, and I'll be interested to hear what results you have with your own bait. So this is going to conclude the first part of the clip. In the second part of the clip, I'll be discussing baiting patterns, high attract hook baits, which is a bit of a fashionable phrase. And don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and make a comment. And I'll see you in part 2.